Hey everyone, my name is Allie and welcome to my channel, and if you have been following me then you'll know that I did just recently finish Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston, and I didn't rate it exactly as high as everyone else did, which is something that I really wanted to talk about because I have some opinions, I have some things that I want to say, and I did write a review, but I didn't feel like I got to touch on everything there, and I really wanted to make this video just to kind of talk about some of my opinions, because basically the consensus that I've seen on Twitter, on YouTube, everywhere else has been basically this is a 4 to 5 star read, and I haven't really seen very many other people rate it anything below a 4 or 5, which is fine and great, and I totally see where they're coming from, and I don't want this to like be a video that's about invalidating everyone else's opinions, because that's not what I'm making this video for. I just wanted to throw my opinions out there, and mainly I wanted to put out this video because I feel like varying opinions are really important, especially when it comes to like really hyped books. And like I said, I don't want to dismiss anyone else's opinion, I don't want to invalidate, but I just kind of want to show how I felt while reading the book and kind of how I'm feeling after having read the book. So here is Red, White, and Royal Blue. The cover is so pretty. I bought this literally the day that it came out, and I'm so glad that I did because it's such a beautiful book, and it has some representation that's super needed, and it's also a new adult book, which is kind of like an age range that doesn't really get the kind of attention and book deals that it should be getting, especially since so many readers are in that age range, and it's definitely something that people are asking for, but the publishing industry isn't really giving to us. So I feel like by supporting more new adult books, then maybe the publishing industry will listen and kind of take notice of the need for new adult books. So basically, Red, White, and Royal Blue follows two different guys. One of them is the son of the President of the United States, who is also the first female president of the United States. And then there's another guy, and he is the grandson of the Queen of England, and they kind of have this sort of hate-to-love relationship going on. Alex, who is the first son, really hates Henry, who is the Prince of Wales, and they've never really gotten along very well. They've either been super standoffish towards each other, or it's kind of been like different altercations between the two of them, and they never seem to get along. So basically this book was pitched to me as a hate-to-love romance, but I feel like it's not exactly a hate-to-love romance. I think that that is an element of the book, but it's definitely not the entire point of the book, if that makes any sense. The hate to love is really resolved within the first third of the book. I read, I think, up to like maybe 100 or 200 pages, and it felt like that plot had already been resolved, it had already been gone through, and then we had another 200 to 300 pages left of a different kind of plot. So for me, I really love hate-to-love romances, and I find those super interesting and super fun, but having this book pitched as a hate-to-love romance feels kind of dishonest because it really doesn't have a lot to do with the plot. Like, yes, they do hate each other for a little bit of the book, but that is resolved super quickly. The hate to love is really kind of only in the first maybe 50 pages, and then after that, once they've gotten to know each other a little bit better within those 50 pages, 50 to 100 pages, it's like the hate to love is completely dismissed and forgotten about, and it's all about this other plot that kind of starts at around page 200, and it just felt like a really disconnected kind of plot. It didn't feel like there was one thing that we were like trying to go for. It felt like there were a lot of little mini plots, but nothing that was like just super cohesive to the entire story. I would have really preferred seeing the hate to love romance explored a little bit deeper, instead of it just kind of being used as a quick little plot device to get the book going and then having been discarded around like the 100-page mark. And I just felt like there wasn't a lot of development within their hate to love romance. I was never really convinced that Alex really hated Henry. Like, it was starting to develop in the beginning of the book, but then once it was like resolved, it just didn't really matter at that point. The hate that Alex had felt for Henry was just kind of discarded, like I said, and I just wanted that part of the plot to be a little bit more developed. So like I said, this is also a pretty big book. This is a little over 400 pages, and I felt like the length of this book was absolutely unnecessary. Like I said, a lot of the plot of the hate to love, like what this is pitched as hate to love, is really resolved within the first 100 pages or so. And I felt like if that's what we're going to pitch it as, we might as well have the entire book be about that rather than the first third of the book being about that or the first fourth of the book being about that. And it just felt like there wasn't enough of a zeroed in direction for the plot to go. It just seemed like everything was all over the place. It didn't really seem like a cohesive book. It felt like a collection of different events that happened in their lives rather than an entire story with a beginning, middle, and end. And maybe that works for some people. It just didn't really work for me. It didn't feel like the plot was strong enough. It didn't feel like it was developed enough, and it definitely didn't feel like the book had gone through enough editing. I don't think that this book needed to be 400 pages long. I think it could have done with maybe a 50 to 100 page cut. There were a lot of filler scenes that happened throughout the book, a lot of scenes that were totally forgettable, that if you tried to like get me to remember certain scenes, it would be totally impossible because A, they were just like not relevant to the plot at all, or B, they were just forgettable in themselves, or C, it just really was like something that seemed like Casey wanted to put in there to bump up the word count. And even a lot of her relevant scenes within this book were definitely super wordy. It felt like she was really trying to kind of beef up the word count. For some reason, I really don't know why, a lot of romances aren't exactly over 400 pages. And not to say that that's not like, that's absolutely like not a thing or like you shouldn't do that. It's mainly just that I don't think that this story needed over 400 pages to tell the plot, to, you know, to get everyone to love the characters. I felt like I had loved the characters within like the first 50 pages. I didn't need 400 pages to convince me that Alex and Henry were good together or that they were great characters. I felt like the 400 pages was just a little too much. It could have been around like maybe 300 to 350 pages long and still would have gotten the job done and probably would have been a better and more concise plot. Another thing that I didn't really enjoy or appreciate was the third person present tense point of view. I had taken a bit of a break from reading this at around the 200 page mark, and that's right smack dab in the middle of them conversing through email. So it was kind of easy to get back in, and I'm like, you know what, I can push through the third person. It's gonna be okay, I'm gonna be fine. But then once the emails stopped and like the regular prose started again, it was like I had totally forgotten that the book was written not only in third person point of view, but also in present tense. And I'm just like, why? Why was it third person present tense? I would love to know why, because it just grated on me so hard. It constantly took me out of the story, and it was just really hard to pay attention when it was not only third person, but it was also present tense. I feel like those two things are super conflicting and don't typically work together, especially not in just like a regular contemporary new adult romance. I felt like it needed to be either third person past tense or first person present tense, and then maybe it would have worked a little bit better, but third person present tense for me personally just never really works well together. And I really wish that Casey had written it either, like if she had chosen maybe third person past tense or first person present tense. And I just don't really even see the need for third person, mainly because this is only told in Alex's point of view. We never really get to go into the minds of any of the other characters. No other points of view are present. So it's just like, I don't understand why third person was necessary when it was only told from Alex's perspective. I feel like third person is really utilized within multiple perspective books, and when I see it with just one perspective, it kind of feels a bit wasted. And I feel like I would have been able to empathize a bit more with Alex and enjoy his character a bit more if it had been written in first person. There were points in this book where I just really did not like Alex, where he was just boring, or I didn't really understand his motives, or I couldn't really understand, you know, what he was trying to do or feel or think or say or whatever. And I felt like that would have been a bit more clear if it had been written in first person, because of the closeness that you get within first person of like really being put into their shoes and really getting to understand what they're thinking. I feel like third person in a contemporary really distances you from the characters and kind of starts to feel a little bit impersonal. And that's why I kind of like third person in a fantasy a bit more, because I, you know, don't live that same life. I'm not in a fantasy book. I'm not, you know, around dragons or whatever. And so third person feels a bit more natural to that setting. But first person is a lot more natural for me personally in a contemporary setting. And I feel like I can connect more with the characters and really understand them and learn more about these characters, rather than being so disconnected from them within a third person perspective. So there were some other things that I was kind of like, I really liked, but I also wasn't super into. And that was mainly the Latinx / Mexican representation. I am also Mexican, and I didn't really feel like this was like the most authentic representation of Latinx or Mexican people and the culture. And I'm not sure if Casey McQuiston is half Latinx or half Mexican or whatever. I don't know if, you know, she has family members that are, or what her connection is to being Mexican or being Latinx or the culture or whatever. But I just didn't feel like it came off very genuine, and it didn't really feel like a lived experience. It felt more like she had kind of watched from the outside looking into this kind of culture, to these people, and she just tried to replicate it in the book, which is totally, like, that's fine. And I don't want to like invalidate her writing these characters, because I think she did do a really good job at characterizing a lot of these characters within the book. That sounds so redundant, but I do feel that way. And I think it was super clear that she was trying to be very respectful and as genuine as she possibly could be, but I just don't know if that was exactly within her lane to do so. And I wonder now if maybe she chose third person because it kind of felt like she wasn't really telling it from Alex's perspective, even though it is from his perspective, that maybe that distance kind of meant that she could write this Latinx Mexican character. But I don't know if it really worked for me. Like, the longer that I think about it, the more it's just not sitting super well with me. And I don't know how any other Latinx or Mexican people feel about it. I mean, if you really like the representation, that's totally cool. It just didn't sit super well with me, and I think that's okay. And then I really did like the bisexual representation. It's not like carbon copy of my experience of being bisexual, but I really did like seeing how Alex kind of navigated through his sexual awakening and seeing how he dealt with realizing that he's bisexual, because I felt like that was one of the most interesting parts of the book. And I really felt like she didn't like focus on it too much, but she also didn't ignore it. And I really liked that part of the book. And I also liked Henry's, you know, experience of being gay and kind of his backstory, and I liked all of that. Something I didn't necessarily like was the outing of both of them. For some reason, outing stories don't really sit well with me anymore, and, you know, being outed really freaking sucks. That definitely wasn't a knock against this book while I was rating it or while I was trying to, you know, come up with my feelings about this book. It's just something that I've been thinking about lately, and I didn't really let it affect my opinions on this book. At least I hope I didn't, because it's not really Casey McQuiston's fault, because I know that they're queer or she's queer. I don't really know how Casey identifies, but I know that Casey is queer, so that feels totally fine and authentic to me. It's just something that I've been thinking about lately. But I could really see where people would really love this book. Some of the things that I really liked about it were definitely the characters. I really liked Casey's characterization of Alex and of Henry and of Alex's sister and the daughter of the vice president, I believe. And I really liked, you know, all of their like little dynamic of like BFFs and like, you know, they're so close. And I really liked the like addition of kind of the media within this book. I felt like that was super fun and interesting and also felt really authentic. And I also really liked Alex's mom. I loved the ending. The ending really got to me. Like, I cried so much at the ending. It just felt really like cathartic to read about a female president winning, especially a female president like the one in this book. And it just really got to me. And I don't know, it felt so right, and I loved it, and it, like I said, felt cathartic. And I really enjoyed that part of the book. I also really liked the beginning. I didn't find the beginning slow at all. A lot of other people found it slow. I found it to be really engaging. It was kind of more like the middle sections. I felt like after the first like fourth or third of the book, it really got super slow and dragged on so much. And then the last third of the book was really, really fast and really engaging. So I felt like it was just like the huge middle chunk of the book that was like a really, really tough thing to get through. So that's just kind of like my entire thoughts about this book. There's nothing else I really feel like passionate about saying. I just kind of wanted to get some of my opinions out there, kind of explain what my thought process was about this book and about reading it and how I feel now. And I did rate it a 3 out of 5 stars. While I was reading the book, I kind of flip-flopped between maybe a 2 stars, 3 stars. It never really got to 4 stars for me. It just never really hit that like sweet spot of like everything that I wanted from this book and everything that I was kind of pitched for in this book. It just never really got to the point where I wanted it to go. But I don't feel like it was so bad that it was like a 2 or a 1 star read. It's definitely a solid 3-star read. And I would recommend it to people who are interested in reading it. And I don't want to like invalidate anyone who loves this book. You know, I definitely want to make that clear. It just wasn't a book for me, and that's really disappointing. And I really wish that I had loved this book. I wanted to love it so much, but it just didn't happen for me, and that's okay. I'm trying to like come to terms with me not enjoying certain books, or me kind of being disappointed about books that I've hyped up really high in my head. I don't need to love every single book that is hyped. I don't need to love every single book that I think I'm going to love, and I have to kind of be okay with that. I am really glad that I supported Casey though. I'm glad that I was able to buy the book the day that it came out, especially from one of my indie bookstores in my area, and that really meant a lot to me. So I'm really glad that I picked up this book. I'm glad that I read it, and I hope that if you pick it up that you really enjoy it a lot more than I did. And yeah, those are kind of all of my thoughts about this book. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and even if you didn't, please feel free to like start a conversation in the comments. I would love to talk to you guys about this book, and I would love to hear your opinions, whether they were good or bad, whether they agreed with mine or didn't agree. I totally want to hear how you feel about this book, and I want to know kind of your experience while reading it, because I think that's super important to kind of give any kind of opinion that you want to give, especially if it's something that you feel really passionate about. And please remember to follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Goodreads. All of those links are down below. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye!